Welcome back to our podcast. On this Teaming Up episode, Greg and Paulyn will outline the 4 A's of Hodges' research process. Don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on the latest episodes. And if you're curious and want to see the faces behind the expertise, video versions of each podcast episode can be found on YouTube. That's it from me. Sit back, relax, and get ready to learn.
So you and I are here today to talk about one of your favorite things in the world, near and dear to your heart, which is research and insights.
Yay!
And right, of course, and audits and all of the tools and processes and all of the things that go into all of that. So why don't we just dive right in? Why don't you start us off by giving everybody an overview of communications research, what it involves, and maybe what the difference between that and audits are.
Sure, happy to. I think at least the way that I think of communications research or comms research is, really anything that informs strategies, informs tactics. And it doesn't have to be this big, expensive, long thing that people think of. A lot of times when they hear research, they think of like high-level data analysis and like months-long projects or intensive studies. And it certainly can be that, but it can also just be some of the very top-line metrics that are available on platforms like Facebook or Google Analytics, or even like anecdotal feedback that employees might have or customers might have. Like all of this can inform communications efforts. So in my mind and in our mind at Hodges, that's kind of what comms research is. And when we talk about audits, that's really just a framework for gathering comms research or social media research or content marketing research. Those are opportunities for us to work with organizations to go in and take a look at a very specific thing. And again, whether it's their use of one platform, all social platforms, or their PR efforts at large. And depending on the goals, we'll use different research strategies to inform our recommendations and work with them to implement those changes.
And I think we would also say at Hodges, ideally, all our clients would begin any campaign or any project that they're about to start on with some kind of level of research.
Yes.
But oftentimes, right. But that isn't always the case, right? So like when we get brought in, it's usually because they've started and things aren't working out, or they've been doing the same sorts of things and things are getting stagnant, or they've been getting some sort of like negative feedback. Could you talk to us a little bit more about or give some examples of issues we've seen clients come to us for where it would precipitate a need for an audit or for some kind of research?
Certainly. Yeah, there's, you mentioned some of them and I'll dig into them, but there's definitely, a list of more common reasons that we're brought in. Sometimes it's to address a negative issue, whether it's a series of complaints or a negative drop in some of the KPIs that they're monitoring, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. So we'll come in and take a look specifically at that problem and try to figure out exactly why things have changed and what they can do to rectify that. Other times, it's not so much that something bad's happening; it's just nothing's happening. Things have plateaued. That up into the right trajectory that they may have seen for months or even years has changed and leveled off. And so we'll come in and, come in with some fresh ideas. And often that's one of the big benefits of working with an agency like ours, like Hodges, is that, we aren't bogged down in the day-to-day as much and can come with a fresh perspective and, clients get to work with a group that's, up to date on best practices across kind of the whole PR spectrum. And so that's a big help to kind of come up with fresh new ideas. And then sometimes too, it's not to address, a problem, negative or stagnant. It's just to help plan for the future. an organization might be launching a new service or a new product or just starting a new kind of long-term planning phase, that they might be at the end of their current strategic plan or strategic vision, and they're trying to figure out what they should be focused on in the future and how PR and marketing should fit into that. And so a lot of times we'll work with clients on that too, is just to help to inform kind of these larger organizational plans.
Yeah. And another thing I'd add to that list too, we see a lot of times clients come to us with changes in budget, either an increase or a decrease in budget, right? Like, oh, next year we have less. So how can we be effective with less of a budget? How can we sort of still get the same results with either less resources or less money? Or on the opposite side of that is like, oh, we're getting a lot more money this year, or we've got grants and we want to do some new things with that. How can we be effective with that budget? And so a lot of times we'll come in and help them come up with a plan to figure out how to spend that budget.
Yeah. And why you were saying that, and that's why I love these conversations, is you brought to mind another idea or another example of how we'll work with organizations is sometimes, it's a team that ultimately wants to do the work in-house, and maybe they're bringing on a more junior content person or a more junior PR person, that there's not the expectation that they're going to kind of have this higher level strategy expertise. And so a lot of times either before they join or right after they join an organization, we kind of come in and do an audit or do some research to kind of help set up a framework under which they can operate, that ensures that they are kind of checking all the right strategy boxes. But again, there's no expectation and undue expectation or burden on them to have more expertise than they should have at the stage in their career. So we'll do that a lot of times, is kind of get things up and running and going, and then let them kind of go off and be successful.
Yeah, definitely. Change in personnel is something that always mixes things up for us on the client side.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, what does some of this research look like when we begin to execute it?
Yeah. So our audits, whether, sometimes we'll call them just content audits or discovery insights projects, but it's all synonymous with it. I think it all really centers on 4 main phases. And because we're good PR people, we like alliteration. So it's the 4 A's. The first is assess. And this is a stage where it's really our team getting up to speed and getting smarter about both the client, the issue that we're trying to solve for, and just their organization and the industry landscape in which they operate. This is a really, really helpful time because, there's certain industries at Hodges that we have more experience in than others, but, each client is different, each problem is different, each industry is different. And so it's important that, we spend a little bit of time, and it's usually 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the complexity of the assignment. But, meeting with the core team on the client side, which is usually kind of the head marketing or PR person, to hear more from them and their team, and then really starting to pour through any available materials they have. So sometimes that's existing strategy documents, existing reporting documents. This is the time where, we'll ask for access to their social media channels and Google Analytics and any, platform like that has readily available metrics. And, we kind of go through and just, again, start getting a sense and assessing what we think are some of the challenges and opportunities. And at that point, we come back, and this is an important thing with these projects for us, is that at the end and beginning of each phase is, a deliberate kind of comprehensive conversation with the client. Not that we're not talking to them throughout the phases, but at each one, it's kind of us reporting back in a formal way of, this is what we found, and this is what we think we should be doing moving forward. Because we find that if we don't do that, organizations and clients just aren't as invested in the end result. And it's important that, they share their institutional knowledge, there's a tremendous value on that. At the end of the assess, it's, us presenting to the client and what we hope to solve for and some of the insights that we want to find in the next phase, which is align. And what we mean by this is, making sure that whatever expectations an organization's stakeholders have, so whether that's employees, customers, whomever, that those expectations are aligned with the organization's actions. Because so often in PR and marketing, when things aren't working the way they should, that's where the issue is. There's some type of misalignment between what the organization's doing, or at least how those actions are being perceived, and the expectations of those key stakeholders. And so this is the phase where we'll start doing a lot of our own primary research. So, some of the tactics that we often do here is surveying of those key stakeholder groups, focus groups, one-on-one surveys at times. But really, this is the opportunity for us to hear from specific people or specific groups of people important to an organization, as well as some of the people informing some of the marketing or PR efforts, because sometimes too the reason they're coming up with these ideas or setting these directions for an organization is they feel that they have a handle on customer expectations or things like that. And this is a good time for us to hear from them of what they think. And it can be very helpful or productive, maybe it's a better word, if, again, their thoughts of what they think their customers feel about the organization isn't necessarily lined up. And those can be important things to hear from as well.
Yeah, I want to go back and touch on two of the things that you mentioned. So this sort of assess, align phase being a 2 to 4 week process, right? That's just like the first half of our process, and really digging into their analytics, getting on their platforms, reviewing all their materials, and doing competitor research, all that kind of stuff takes that amount of time. But the full process really is more like 8 to 12 weeks, depending on the scope of the project.
Yeah, it's the full project I would say, is exactly that, 8 to 12. Occasionally, if everything clicks just right, it can be a touch below 8 weeks, but it's also not uncommon for some of the more complex, larger research projects that we do to be even longer than 12 months. Some can be 4 to 6 months, depending again on the complexity of the project.
Yeah. And then also you were saying this is a collaborative effort between us and the client. We want to make sure that they're brought in along the process the entire way, that we're giving them feedback and we're having check-in points with them along the way to talk about what we're finding and what we're seeing, and making sure that aligns with the direction they think we should be going in and aligns with what they're hoping to get out of this.
Yeah.
And in that interview process that you were talking about, I think it's really helpful when we're clear with the client and the people that we're interviewing what we hope to get out of this, sort of starting the interview off with giving the interviewee an idea of what the scope of the project looks like, what the end result looks like, and how our interview with this person is going to help inform that work. I think when we give them that on the front end, a light bulb goes off for a lot of them, because a lot of times it's like people who aren't involved in the Marcom or marketing process or team or whatever. So we're bringing in stakeholders and interviewees from all across the organization, and sometimes they're not as involved with this work. So when we give them an overview of what we're doing, what we're trying to accomplish, a lot of the times I feel like we get a lot more out of those interviews, because they know what we're looking for, and they know, what kinds of challenges or pain points or solutions we're trying to look for when we talk with them. So I think it's really helpful.
Absolutely. And I don't think that you can clarify the primary objective enough. There is one interview that comes to mind on a previous project where about halfway through the conversation, it was evident that the person was answering the questions thinking that our work had a very different objective than it really did, and kind of had to go back, regroup, and then kind of re-clarify some of the previous questions, because their expectation that our work was much more broader in scope than it was, and really starting to address things that were well beyond the PR and marketing spectrum. So to your point, right. Yes, it's important to be very clear and is singularly focused on the objective of the work ahead of those conversations, particularly with folks who might not be as dialed into the day-to-day works of the PR marketing department.
Yep. Do you want to go over the last two phases of our process, analyze and activate?
Analyze and activate. Yes. So the next, after we've done the assess and align, where we've gotten all the materials from the client, looked through those, heard from all the different stakeholder groups that we need to hear from. The next part is our team really going through and analyzing everything. And not that we're not doing degrees of analysis throughout, but this is the phase where we finally have everything and can kind of go through and start building out our recommendations. And then coming out of that, we'll do our final presentation to a client. And what that final presentation or final deliverable looks like can vary from scope to scope. At the very least, it's a presentation or a PowerPoint deck, kind of going through and pulling out some of the key pieces of research, the key findings, and a handful of overarching recommendations that we think they should follow to meet the different objectives that they established at the beginning. For other clients where they have a much greater need for kind of specifying all that out, in addition to kind of that high level presentation, we'll come in and also develop more of a soup to nuts PR marketing plan, anywhere from the next 6 months to the next 12 months, kind of detailing in with a lot of specificity for specifically how and where they should be doing various things to meet their stated goals and objectives. And that's kind of what brings us into the next phase, activate. And some of our clients, we don't move into this. As we talked about earlier, they're really just looking to us to kind of point them in the right direction with the right thinking and ideas, and they will go on and execute all of that. But for the ones that need our help for certain aspects or the entire plan, we'll kind of then move into the activate, and that is kind of activating all of our ideas. And whether organizations work with us or not, this is a really, really important part, because research should never be done just for the sake of research. It should always be done to inform a subsequent action. Otherwise, it's just kind of, why are we doing this? And so it's that's something that we're always very clear. And it might change, some of the recommendations when they're put into practice. You might have to make some tweaks here or there, but it's really important to us that organizations learn from this process and use this to inform their subsequent actions and strategies.
Yeah, and I've heard you say this before too, but we don't always have to be the ones executing on the plan, right? Mm-hmm. If our research and our recommendations find that they're better off doing more SEO, or they need help in that area, or advertising is really what they need to be doing, or other things that just aren't in our wheelhouse, we're upfront about that and pointing them to partners that we know that we work with that can execute on that work for them.
Oh, yeah. I think the last thing that the Hodges team wants is to be in a situation where we are overselling or overpromising things beyond our capabilities. So if there are strategies that we firmly believe that they need to do that we cannot do, as much for the client's sake as for ours, because it is very stressful to be on the hook for something that you're not up to task to do. So that's something too that we're very clear on, is kind of what recommendations that we feel that an organization can fulfill on their own, and then when we do feel there's a third party that's needed, specifically who that is and whether or not that it doesn't even have to be Hodges. Sometimes it can just be you need a PR agency, whether that's us or somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the questions I feel like we get a lot from clients before we enter this process with them or during is, do they have to stop their other Marcom efforts while we're in the middle of this work?
A lot of, if not all, marketing and PR people would probably get fired if they just was like, we're going to stop all PR and marketing while we do this 4 to 6 month long research project. Organizations have to keep, marketing and doing some of the basics. We'll use blocking and tackling, tactics to keep their marketing and PR programs going. A lot of times, though, what we'll tell organizations, as we start this process, or caution against is committing to like any new contracts or any new tactics that, particularly those that are going to take a lot of time or money. Often this work is to identify which of those efforts are fruitful and which they should invest in more down the line. And so until we're done with our work, holding off on those, and again holding off on any big commitments or things like that. Obviously, our work doesn't always align with certain deadlines that organizations might be under. And so we'll do our best with, big old good disclaimers of, we're not done with our work, but based on what we're seeing so far, we could see this being a good idea, or we'd caution against doing it. But ultimately, again, we like to go through this process and, oftentimes be brought in early enough so we're not under the gun and, can do a thorough, deliberate job to answer some of these questions. So that's one of those things, is that it's always good to be brought in, well in advance of any kind of big, planning or budgeting conversations that an organization might be having.
Right. So maybe don't spend $1 million on that big ad campaign.
Maybe don't, because maybe you need to commit $2 million to that ad campaign, and $1 million is not going to cut it based on our work. But also, it might be $1 million wasted. We just don't know until we're done with our work.
Well, thank you so much for this conversation.
Likewise.
I hope everybody gets a lot out of it. I know I did.
Yeah.
And I'll chat with you later.
Yeah, and I will say one little PS to this is that if you're still listening and anything here piqued your interest, or you have any questions, we're also always happy to just have initial conversations with folks just to kind of hear about their problems and kind of give some very broad thoughts before we kind of engage in any formal capacity. So if you have any research or questions, or if there's things that your organization has been struggling with, don't hesitate to reach out, because we love connecting with folks and pointing them in the right direction, whether it's with us or with somebody else.
That's right. And as you can tell from this video, we're nice people to talk to. So don't be afraid to reach out. All right, Greg. All right. Talk to you later.
Bye, Pauline. Thank you.
Bye.